someone out of the house. So I had to come back. Okay. So, but yeah, meditation is a great one for kind of helping you be able to get like a clearer mind, not be inundated with any like intrusive thoughts or anything like that having to do with your trauma, and living, like I said, living in post trauma, right? We want to get out of that mentality as soon as we possibly can. But we do also have to understand that sometimes it's an ongoing process. It doesn't matter how well you are. There are going to be times when there's going to be certain triggering events, triggering people, and you're just, going to be back in it for a second. And that's why it's so important to have these tools and to be able to utilize them, appropriately and accordingly. Okay, so creative expression. I have found a lot of help through this, through creative expression, through creating content, through, just being able to make something that's going to help others, that's going to be beneficial to other people in some capacity. Um, I really feel strongly about what I'm supposed to do. I feel like I was put on this earth to help. And so I like to think of ways that are, very varied because I want as much diversity in my ability to help not only different people, but with their particular situations. So, creative expression doesn't have to be creating content, obviously. It can be anything in the creative realm, um, whatever you decide that is, right? Because everybody has different takes. Some people, they get into, making art. Some people um, find like some type of creative hobby. So it's just, again, a way to kind of fill the space of what is taking up space in your mind right now. It's kind of pushing it out and putting your mind on something, allowing you to be very mindful during the process, especially, right? Not allowing yourself to leave, not allowing, because there's some people that can like disassociate basically sometimes because that's what they did. That was their initial response. And so it's something that they always kind of can go back to. Not everyone, but some people. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to be taken out of yourself and again being that third party. Like you don't want to do that, because then what you're doing is you are preventing your healing from occurring. Every time a person, whether it's intended or not, but when you're in that like disassociation realm, you're not able to process anything. You're not able, because you're kind of not there. you know but being very mindful during, everything as much as you can, but especially with like creative pursuits, right? So it's really like fully authentically you coming out in whatever medium or mode you are expressing yourself in. And then body awareness. So kind of always checking in, being aware of certain signals, right? So this was something that I discovered um, was happening to me and I didn't know. So I was experiencing these like weird sensations on my body, and I didn't know what it was. And it really took a lot of thought and it took a lot of work, but I realized, I was like, oh, this is stuff from my past. And my brain is sending signals, right? To like, I don't know, maybe remind me to be like, hey, we don't want to live with all this anymore. Can we process all this out? And it was just it was a scary experience because I didn't know what was going on like at first, and I was like, is like someone doing this? Like what it like I didn't know what to think. I honestly didn't know what to think. It was just so surreal, so out there. So but I know that this happens with other people. So just know it's your brain. It's your brain doing it to you, but it's not your conscious brain. It's probably your subconscious brain. Um, But, trying to stay like in your body, trying to be present in your body, right? Not just with your experiences, but also with yourself and how you're feeling. And again, checking in, trying to figure out, okay, when is it that I'm having a certain sensation? And then that triggers a thought or something, right? Or when is it that when I'm most uncomfortable, this is where I'm holding all that, where, it's like tension or anxiety or stress. I know a lot of people describe to me, oh, sorry for hitting the mic. And even I would describe it too as like that feeling of like an elephant on your chest and, feeling like, when is this weight going to come off? Like this is a lot. And so again, just understanding like, all right, this is something that my brain is, having my body experience. It probably just needs to get some shit out. Like let's just be real. It needs to just release some of this stuff. And definitely through acknowledgement and through journaling, like that will be a great way for you to like be on the road to starting that process. Build a support system. I cannot tell you how important this is. Build a support system. Now, I've worked with clients before that basically say they don't have one. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. But you can build one. It doesn't, just because maybe in this current moment you don't have like a supportive network, that doesn't mean that you can't build one. That doesn't mean that you can't find one. That's why like ideas like the support group, right? Maybe going to a support group. You can build, your own support group. Or if you do have family and maybe you have some family and some friends, not all, but most, or half or whatever, people that you really trust. And they're here to support you as well. And also acknowledge, that's the one thing about acknowledgement that I didn't hit. With acknowledgement, I think it also includes making another person aware. Okay. So not a therapist, but someone in your life that you're close to that doesn't know this. It's probably a good idea to not only for yourself, but for that person. So that way they can understand maybe why you react in certain ways to certain things. Acknowledge the trauma to another person. Okay. The worst thing that can happen is they get a look on their face. I mean, or whatever, right? But or they, can't handle it and stuff like that. Well, that's great for you because now like, okay, this person couldn't handle that and that's fine. It's not my burden to carry anymore, but it is, important for me to state like, okay. And I'm not saying you have to do this the rest of your life. No, it's just for like when you're in it, when you're doing the work. Um, and then having self-compassion. So when I was a teenager, um, I was going through a lot of stuff and I basically, kind of like stopped eating and just, couldn't really deal with the stress and all that. And I remember constantly like being hyper focused on this thing, on this, this one thing, being very hyper focused on it. But it was because I didn't want to focus on having to do the work of dealing with the traumas that I had experienced up until that point. And so that would manifest as like really negative self-talk, saying, oh, you're too fat, you're too this, you're too whatever. And I would be at like 105 pounds, well, that's like 12 pounds less than I am right now. And I just felt all this like stuff. And I realized I was like, but this isn't coming from an actual like obsession to be thin. I felt like I stopped eating. Maybe that was my way of disassociating from the situations that I had experienced and disassociating from the feelings of like betrayal, you know, definitely, having to really, dig deep and get into it, get into like all of it. I have found that when you're honest with yourself and real with it, you start that from the beginning, it's much easier to heal. When you know who you are truly in your most healthy state, that's a great place to begin too. At least knowing who that is, what that version of you is, knowing that, right? And that be the focus. And it took I couldn't seem to articulate at that time to the people that were in my support network. I couldn't communicate it. I couldn't explain, like, I think this is tied to this, because I didn't want to, like, not everyone knew. So did I couldn't, you know. And when the people that are closest to you, when you're afraid of, like, how your relationship dynamic may change, you know, because of a certain particular situation. So, I allowed myself to live in fear for like a long time. And I was still, active, productive, working, being able to do all of the things that I needed to do. But I was totally, like, constantly beating myself up and constantly bringing myself down, all while keeping a smile on my face. And that's something I still hold on to today. Like, if I'm nervous, if I'm anything, I just laugh, because I would rather be doing that than going somewhere else, going somewhere negative. So, having compassion for all of those things, having compassion for um, the fact that you are okay, you are clear to feel whatever you feel about it, and you are okay and safe to express that, especially if it's like immense pain. You are safe to do so, you know. Um, it's when we are in that, like, survival mode, which this tends to put people in, right? Trauma, that's what it, or the post traumatic life. It sometimes will easily put us into this, like, survival mode, because all we're trying to do is get away from the reminders and get away from anything that has anything to do with it, like, anything. And that's avoidance. That's just how some people process it a lot, and everyone does it to some degree. It's just a normal reaction to something that's uncomfortable is avoidance, running from the uncomfortable. Whereas in the work that I've done on myself, I've learned that no, actually, I have to accept the uncomfortable in order to be able to deal with this properly, and in order to be able to, handle this properly. Not let it affect me all the time or whatever, right? Like, not allow it to be this, like, huge, mounting thing. I mean, not letting it get to that point. That's why having these tools, right? So you can prevent it from turning into something huge or big, some type of big event that, you know, you're you'll just be letting all this stuff out, and it's like, well, okay, it's probably better for it to be scheduled. But having compassion for yourself, no matter how you deal with this or process it, just trying to see from a loving perspective, looking on yourself and being like, okay, this wasn't your fault. This wasn't your fault, and it's going to be okay. And you just need to get it out, you know? And then setting boundaries. So this is really important, especially if you've been traumatized by someone that you have to see on a semi or on a regular basis. um, you have to be able to kind of, when I'm talking about setting boundaries, I mean, yes, physical boundaries, of course. But what I'm also talking about is, like, a mental boundary. Like, no matter what, this person isn't credible anyways. No matter what, this person cannot affect me. The only way I can be like affected is if I'm allowing it to occur, or if I'm in a not the healthiest state and am allowing, this stuff to, you know, do that. That person, even if they're the ones that hurt you, that person, you have to have strong boundaries with them. Ideally, of course, if you don't have to deal with this person or, something since the event has occurred to where they're not here anymore or whatever, right? That doesn't necessarily fix it, right? So I'm not saying to be around the person. I'm just saying if you happen to be, the boundaries aspect of it is so important because that's going to be your way. That's going to be your shield, your armor to keep that person at bay, to keep them away from you, right? Um, and that goes with, a lot of different things, right? Boundaries are 100% so important. You must know them. You don't know them unless you know your value and you know your worth, right? So again, a lot of this takes inner work, a lot of this takes time. So for me, it took me years because I was in that, cycle for years. And so it takes time, but it's definitely something where you're like, you are seeing improvement on the daily. You are seeing like, oh, okay, like I'm improving. You're seeing it just by doing the work, just by making like little small efforts, just by making certain changes, but especially by keep like not only setting your boundaries, but keeping them. It doesn't matter what someone tells you. It doesn't matter um, what they're trying to do. If they're trying to invade your boundaries, then that's not a good person to be around regardless. If they're trying to invade your boundaries, to me, that is like manipulation. So, and then finally is gradual exposure. So, gradual exposure works for a lot of things. And I think, I know that it's worked for me. It's worked for my clients. But the caveat being, you have to be healthy enough to engage in this practice, right? So with gradual exposure, that would be, let's say, like a certain sound or something triggers something for you, right? Whatever that may be. When that happens, you might immediately, like if it's something like within your control to go turn off, you may immediately want to go turn it off. Instead, it's sitting with that noise, sitting with that sound, sitting with the memory, sitting with it all. I know it sucks. But sitting with it and then turning it off, right? Gradual. Everything is gradual. Everything is small. Um, People that deal with a lot of anxiety when they're in crowds and stuff like that, right? So it would start with going to places that there's people, but there's not like a lot of people, right? And then gradually getting them to a bigger crowd of people, whatever, for whatever reason it is, that's definitely stretching your rubber band, regardless of if you've experienced trauma or not. But as far as gradual exposure to a person per se, I wouldn't plan that. I mean, that's just me though. I haven't done that. I've been forced to in a way, so there's that. But I don't it wasn't something that I chose or I decided. Now, some people may feel totally comfortable, or not totally comfortable, but feel like, yo, I want to face this demon, let's go. So in that situation, um maybe, you know being around and then leaving, and then just leaving if you know that it's going to be something where everyone's together, everyone's there, and it's like, oh my God, what? So, but that's, kind of, I would say gradual exposure should be much more focused on situations or sounds or like things that you can control, things that you can stop, right? Or maybe you don't even know that they're causing that trigger, that they're causing that reaction from your body, that they're causing, you know, you to relive it. I mean, but when you recognize what it is that causes these things, now you know what that thing is, and you can absolutely choose to ignore it. You could, or you could choose to face it for a little bit and then turn it off. Like, I'm just going to turn this off. Or I'm just going to stop this, or, like, there's nothing wrong with stopping what you're doing because there is so much heaviness with it, right? Because when there's a lot of heaviness with stuff, I say disengage, right? Our most important resources are our time, our energy, and our money, right? So this sounds a lot like a big waste of energy, not work it confronting the trauma isn't, but more living your life without trying to do something about it, if it's in your power, do something about it. I mean, that's the only way through. But with that being said, that is everything that I had today on confronting trauma. If there's any questions or anything that you would like to ask, right now is the time. I don't have anybody banging on my window this time. And if there's not any questions, no worries. Thank you so much for joining this live stream. And don't forget to like and subscribe and consider joining the membership because we're having a lot of fun there. That's all I can say. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Be well. Stay wild.